There's nothing like the feeling of seeing some of the best environments that the world of video games has to offer. There really can be some awe-inspiring places, and I can usually just sit back and watch the in-game scenery for moments at a time. Amazingly crafted towns where buildings sprawl and NPCs hustle in a way that give a real sense of life and community. Arenas that convey a tangible air of spectacle and violence. Factories so complete and real that it feels like the boss could call you in for a chat at any moment. Because the company has been downsizing recently, and I just heard that Kevin from manufacturing just got let go. So it's really only a matter of time before more layoffs happen. And, well, since you're the most recent hire, if anyone's gonna get the axe, yeah, it's gonna be you. So every time the boss passes by you, you're kind of just sitting there thinking, well, today's the day. And you get ready to give that speech, the one about how you hate every single one of your coworkers, and how you wish death upon them. But then your boss kind of just goes to the bathroom or the vending machine or something, and you realize you spent way too much time practicing a speech in the mirror, so you kind of just get back to work. The power and majesty of an attractive, detailed, and well-designed location can honestly pretty easily be overlooked while you're mid-game. Probably because you're preoccupied by whatever murder or conversation that you happen to be carrying out at the time.
We were out on patrol. I saw a marauder camp up in the hills. Thought I could take him. Then my gun misfired. Right through my side. I mean, what are the odds of that, right? Just barely scraped by with my life. Crawled in here and blocked off the exit with those canisters. Gibbering, flesh-eating, law-breaking, unemployed lunatics with guns.
It really is the unsung hero of bringing immersion and believability to a game. The moment that one little thing catches my attention and I'm suddenly aware of the world around me is a moment that almost makes me feel like I had been playing the game with my eyes closed. But that feeling of, dang, what the heck have I been looking at this whole time? Is usually short-lived, because then it's just replaced with an overwhelming sense of awe. Yakuza's neon-lit Kamurocho, the bombed-out and irradiated Commonwealth of Fallout 4, and every single ultra-detailed stage in Smash that really make it a shame that only like 5 of them ever get played in competitive. But even those are really just the drop in the vast ocean of locations in video games that can make me stop and just say, wow. But honestly, for me, the best, most awe-inspiring, stop-me-in-my-tracks environments in video games have always been the ones that showed off the absolute wonders of nature. When I was a kid, one of the games that I, and I'm sure that many other people, poured many hours into was The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And if I had to guess, that's probably where my appreciation for the coded, natural wonders of video games started. To me, it was just always so cool to see the contrast between the lush greens of the Kokiri Forest and the pretty boy melting hues of Death Mountain's lava, and the serene blue waters of Lake Hylia. It made each area feel so different to me as a kid, and going in between them really felt like I was traveling between regions or countries or something. I used to love changing Link's tunic depending on which area I was in, like I was trying to blend in with the culture or something. Even going back to it to this day, I can't help but admire how well the different natural biomes were represented, and how each one of them gave off a very unique feel. I can still get caught up in the atmosphere and just sit for a minute while looking around and being mesmerized by the music that's perfectly paired to each area. It's almost as if each song is that specific natural element in audio form. It can be straight up enchanting, and it really just amplifies the feeling of being surrounded by nature or engulfed in the elements themselves. The Song of Storms, the Serenade of Water, Kokiri Forest, and the Gerudo Valley. I mean, those are just some of my personal standouts, but if I hear almost any song in that game, at any time or place, I can close my eyes and feel the heat of the desert, or see the light playfully dancing through the leaves of the trees. And honestly, anytime it rains in real life, I throw on the Windmill Hut jam. And yeah, that might be a little silly, but I'm from SoCal and rain is a pretty big deal here. And honestly, the Song of Storms just remains one of the slappiest songs in all of gaming to this day.
To this day! To this day!
But it really is impressive to me that there can be such a clear, distinctive feel and unique depiction of nature in a game as old as it is, especially when you consider that they were still kind of just getting their feet wet with the whole 3D World of Zelda thing. And I think that is an important thing to note. Beautiful and effective depictions of nature and honestly any other visual aspect of a game isn't always about how photorealistic something can look. And for me, it rarely is. More often than not, a really strong art style, art direction, or even just an interesting design is what will really make me take a minute from stabbing people in the neck to look around and smell the blood-soaked roses. I mean, dear God.
My God!
The color and vibrance on display in Ghost of Tsushima is otherworldly. Like, it's honestly so beautiful that sometimes I don't even feel like I deserve to look at it. The way the autumn-colored leaves look set against the clear sky and the way that dark, dreary, overcast clouds really can set the mood for a showdown is honestly super inviting and engaging. Like, I can't help but to just stop and slowly rotate the camera around to create some scenic angles. And while Ghost is a game that has a lot of realistic elements, to me at least, its beauty doesn't come from those things. It's not beautiful because things look exactly like they do in real life. It's beautiful because the contrast and saturation is turned up to 11, and the game has great artistic flair and a strong and consistent direction. Like, to me, that game looks like how the tale of a legendary figure of Japan or a poem of the splendor of Japanese landscape feels inside your heart. So it's not really a coincidence that some of my favorite parts of the game were when I came across a spot that I could write haikus. And I just got to sit there and reflect on my journey while taking inspiration from the nature that stood before me. Crafting metaphors about flowing rivers and enduring mountains was a really creative way to get Jin, as well as me as the player, to reflect on our actions and see what we were fighting for. The beautiful world around us is our home and we have to defend it. Some of these scenes were literally some of the most beautiful works of art and wondrous depictions of nature that I have seen in like any medium. I took so many different screenshots during those sections, just because it was really cool to see Jin silhouetted against the homeland that he was fighting to protect. It was almost as if Jin, nature, and I all melded together and our fates became one. And it was really motivating to feel personally responsible for protecting Japan. For me, that feeling was there because of how well the artistic elements of the visuals really elevated the semi-realistic style that game was going for. I don't think I would have had that same connection if the game was just super 100% trying to look as real as possible. I feel almost as if you could take out all the realistic details from the visuals and even make it cartoony, but the waters, trees, and mountains would all still be beautiful in both appearance and theme. I mean, look at our boy Spyro, right? That game is pretty dang far from looking like the outside of our windows, but each homeworld and each level is so creative, unique, and carries its own personality and flair that it's honestly nothing short of beautiful. Each level has their own unique creatures that all have their own culture or ability that perfectly suits the environment that they live in. Crystal glaciers glistening Arctic Ice Age-like setting, home to the hockey-loving ice builders, or the village built into the treetops where ape-like creatures reside and try to give you a potassium-filled death. As kids, me and my siblings would always try to be one of the first ones to claim the worlds for ourselves, and then suddenly declare that we lived there now. And it was 100% just based off how the world looked and the vibe that it had. The placid waters of Evening Lake and the Dreamweavers rolled in the clouds were my personal favorites as a kid. Unfortunately, they were always claimed before I could get to them, so I was forced to live on the rough streets of the Peacekeepers, where cannonballs fly and purple dragons die. And Spiral gives me a very similar experience to that of Ocarina of Time, where each level feels like you're being transported to an entirely different world, separate from the others. And I mean, yeah, that is actually what's happening in Spiral, so I mean, yeah, no duh, right? But still, wait. Hold up, wait a minute.
Oh my God!
It's always interesting to see what ways the new characters that are introduced in each world are one with the nature around them. And when the game does it well by showing how they interact and cohabitate with their specific environment, it's really charming and lends a sense of character to the lands themselves. And it's honestly just really fun and refreshing to see. I think that older games, and especially platformers, are really good at depicting nature in artistic and fun ways. To me, it seems like with older games, developers were trying to make interactive cartoons. Now they're basically trying to make live-action movies. So nowadays, a lot of the AAA developers are mostly going for realism as a benchmark for how good a game can look, and I think that's kind of a shame. Not because I don't like the realistic models of people and nature and other things, because I do for sure. Those things are crazy and amazing, but I just think that those colorful, unique drawings come to life are really endearing and just as beautiful, and definitely bring some more lighthearted fun to the environments, at least in my opinion. There's definitely room for both, so I wish that some of the bigger developers would dip back into those kind of visuals every once in a while. Though it is kind of ironic that one of, if not the biggest video game company, still adheres to that fun, lighthearted aesthetic. Nintendo is still the king of the style and isn't really being challenged by anyone in the AAA space. Nintendo to this day has some of the most picturesque, distinct, and inviting environments, past or present, especially when it comes to nature. They have a knack for having some of the most beautiful and creative applications of nature, not only visually, but in narrative and theme as well. I mean, many of their games wouldn't even exist if they didn't have inspirations that traced back to nature. The creator of Pokemon, Satoshi Tajiri, even noted that his inspiration for the creation of Pokemon just came from exploring his rural home and catching different bugs as a child.
Happy feet, wombo combo. That ain't Falco. It's
Even Miyamoto said that the inspiration for Zelda just came from his experiences exploring hillsides and climbing mountains when he was young. And you can really see that natural influence really heavily in all Nintendo games. I already mentioned Ocarina of Time, but pretty much every Zelda game shows that same love and respect for nature and its beauty. I mean, think about it. How many sections of Zelda games involve having to help an individual or group tied to a specific natural environment through location, theme, lore, religion, or spiritual implication, and the result of your actions cleanse or preserve nature? Spoiler, it's a lot. Even Mario Sunshine had like an anti-pollution theme going on and has you literally cleaning up and washing away filth from an island. Or at least I think that's what that game was trying to do. I mean, Mario Sunshine was kind of weird, and I mean it was really beautiful, but it was still pretty weird. Y'all remember when Mario went to jail? The impact of nature on the gaming industry as a whole is honestly so huge that it's kind of wild to think about. I mean, think about just how many games have been inspired by Zelda or have used the Pokemon format as a blueprint. And then think about how many of those games inspired some other game. You have to wonder if these games didn't exist, would we even have our Dark Souls or something even like Ni no Kuni? Just imagine all the indie games that just wouldn't be a thing anymore. So many things in the world of gaming have their roots in nature, and we kinda have Nintendo to thank for that. So to me, it's no surprise that Nintendo still has some of the best nature locations in all of gaming. The amazing ocean levels of the Mario games, whose waters I wouldn't even mind drowning myself in just because of how beautiful and drinkable they look. Whose sands look like the perfect place to just bask in the sun while listening to the amazing music that plays in the background. Or the snowy mountains of Sinnoh's Route 217, where frigid, freezing white snow hides ice-type Pokemon that are ready to maul a 10-year-old to death with nothing but icicles. And Animal Crossing? The game where those who live in a place where it's basically summer all the time can finally experience the changing of seasons? Me. That's me. I'm talking about me. The sprouting new life of spring where clear blue skies reign and cherry blossoms bloom. The long cries of cicadas and the skies illuminated by firework light. Brought to you by the sweltering heat of summer. The color-changing leaves of fall and the chilling air that signals the coming of Halloween. And the frosty snowscaped lands of winter just awaiting Jingle's yearly visit. I love to experience these virtual places because the best aspects of these environments are hand-picked and handcrafted to be the most expressive and lively that they could possibly be. I can easily get sucked into these places and I just feel so attuned to my surroundings. And I can easily get lost in the crashing of the waves or the crunching of the leaves. Nintendo is really good at giving me that sensation, but even games like The First Tree, Firewatch, and definitely the Harvest Moon games all give me that same feeling of interacting with nature. Whether it's for its beautifully rendered art, themes, or gameplay mechanics, it's easy to get lost in these natural wonderlands. I mean, it's pretty hard not to feel attuned to the land when the whole game is literally just you strolling through nature and talking, or spending the whole day planting crops, mining for ore, and taking care of animals. I mean, unless you're out there just trying to hit on the ladies. And I've already spent a lot of time talking about how good nature is when it's not trying to be realistic. Mostly because that's just my personal jam, but a more realistic style has a lot of merit and a lot of amazing things that I like too. While Ghost of Tsushima doesn't need its realistic elements to make it look beautiful, it would be kind of wrong for me to say that those elements still aren't amazing. The fact that the tall grasses look almost real enough to reach out and touch, but has just enough artistic flair to make it look otherworldly, is what really pushes that game's visuals to new highs. That every mountain looks almost like a giant that you could see a high-res picture of while flipping through your book. Not paying attention to your geology professor, so you don't hear that Chapter 7 will be on next week's test, even though there wasn't enough time to cover it in class. So now you need to read through it over the weekend and download the new study guide by Monday. But even with that, there's just enough personality in each rock crevice to give it its own special, unique qualities. And look, don't worry about why that example was so specific. That semi-realistic foundation is what lets the creative exaggerations of color, contrast, and style really sing. It straddles the line of being realistic and being stylized very well. And I think that that's kind of what most AAA games are trying to do nowadays, is be somewhere on that line. Some lean a little bit further towards one direction or the other, whereas a lot of older and indie games just kind of try to forgo realism altogether. Tomb Raider reboots, the Last of Us games, and even the Resident Evil remakes all kind of lean towards trying to look as real as possible. Whereas games like Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto, and the Assassin's Creed games kind of fall somewhere in the middle of that line. But whenever they choose to go all in on the realism, the nature presented in those games has a surreal beauty to them. It's the kind of beauty that when I stop and stare, I just think, wow. Like, I can't believe someone really made this. Like, I don't know what kind of techno wizardry these artists know, but they must have gotten invitations to Hogwarts. And then got sorted into the Unreal House. Like, whenever I see characters chugging along through the snow or trekking through the heavy rain, I always think to myself, dang, that looks super cold and it would be super tough to actually be doing that. Because for me, when I see natural environments in video games that are super realistic, I never personally feel like, oh, it's so real that it's like I'm actually there. Like I think that a lot of developers would want me to feel, and like maybe a lot of players do, but it honestly kind of does the opposite, but not in a bad way. It divorces me from feeling like I'm in that environment, but it gives me an extreme level of sympathy for the character that I'm playing as. Every time a character is wandering through the desert, I can't help but think that he or she must be overheating or super thirsty, and in turn, that immerses me in a different way. It makes me think about what it would be like to be in an environment like that. Like whenever you're having a romp through the forest or hiding in some bush, my brain will always think, dang, there must be all kinds of bugs out there. I'm glad that ain't me though. And I can connect with the environment and apply real attributes to them because of how lifelike and how realistic they look. And I can sympathize with what the character that I'm playing as would naturally be going through. And that really just doesn't happen with games that are less realistic. But through the act of depicting a beautiful and realistic part of nature, the game made me feel and it made me think. It made me put myself in the position of the character and then in turn draw a connection between the environment and myself. Though sometimes connecting with nature is what the whole game is all about, and it's more than just the visual set. Depending on what setting you're in can affect what you have to do or change the kind of things that you have to pay attention to. The nature of games sometimes gives you the option to adapt to it or take advantage of it. And sometimes it doesn't even give you the option, like sometimes it forces you to adapt. The Long Dark is an obvious example, wherein which you have to constantly be aware of how the snow-stormed mountains are affecting your character. You know, unless you want to catch hypothermia and die starving alone. Dealing with the forces of nature is the game, and it can make you really understand how dangerous and powerful nature can be, and that it should be respected. The nature around you is a real enemy that you have to combat every second that you're playing. And you can't beat nature. You can just survive it. It can be a real nightmare to watch as your body temperature steadily drops while you're just searching for anywhere to take shelter from the icy winds. And then when you do finally see an abandoned house on the horizon, nature just throws you another curveball and now you have to cross over a frozen lake that very well could give way under your weight. And it's almost ironic that such a beautiful thing can just be so dang evil. You have to constantly be aware of how cold you are. Is there somewhere to light a fire? Are there dangerous animals hiding just out of sight beyond the trees? How warm are your clothes? Are they wet? And so on and so forth. The snow isn't there just to look pretty. It's there to kill. And make sure you're wearing socks. But mostly kill. And I mean, it's not just socks, right? Clothing in general is a common way that a lot of games get you to adapt to the environment. I mean, I mentioned Zelda a lot before, but they've been doing the whole an outfit for every occasion thing for a while now. Need to walk on the bottom of a lake? Well, here's a shirt for that. Need to stand in the middle of a volcano and not immediately die? Well, come check out this new skirt. Or you can just be like in Breath of the Wild and keep a flame sword on your back, you know, to keep you warm through the cold nights. And whether a game decides to keep it basic or go super in depth with it, having a player have to care about how the elements around them would naturally affect the character is a pretty fun and engaging way to get the player to understand and pay attention to the power that nature really has. You can give the world and the environment some more believability when you have to react to nature in the way that you kind of would in real life. And it also works the same vice versa. It lends both a sense of believability and intense satisfaction when I myself get to take advantage of nature, and when it reacts in a realistic way. Obviously, Breath of the Wild is a perfect example of this, but so is Genshin Impact. And I mean, that's basically because Genshin Impact is basically just Breath of the Wild anyway. The role that nature has on how you play the game is super cool and a huge component of what makes both games really fun to play. Starting a fire in the grass to burn your enemies and then using the wind to spread the fire is always satisfying. Freezing enemies that are standing in the water, or using the rain to your advantage to deal extra shock damage, or just climbing up rock cliffs to jump off and do a plunging attack is always really great. If the long dark shows you that nature and the elements can be your enemies, then Genshin shows you that nature can be your ally. And when games make nature an actual part of the game, it becomes a character alongside everyone else. It can be kind or mean. It can be your friend or foe. It can even look to you for help. Having nature be interactable almost personifies it. And it's super engaging to me when I get to tangle with the elements. I feel like I know it and can learn to understand it, and that I can respect it. And at the end of the day, that's why I love when video games use nature in their designs. Whenever there's a beautiful, imaginative, artistic, detailed, interactive, or realistic interpretation of that which exists naturally around us, it can provide a deep connection, respect, and appreciation, not only for nature in games or in real life, but for video games as an artistic medium as well. And I'll reiterate, the nature portrayals in video games have been some of the most beautiful and artistic renditions of nature that I have seen in any medium. And I mean, now sure, at least for my personal experiences, nothing in a video game can replace the feeling of what it's actually like to be immersed in nature in real life, at least not yet. But video games can transport me to places that I'll probably never come across in my lifetime, and it gives me just a little taste of what it's like to be there. Whether it be through mechanics or visual design, a video game, something someone made that someone programmed that I get to interact with, can make me feel like I'm at the most beautiful beach in the world, or at the top of a snow-covered mountain, or make me think about what it would be like to be making my way through a dingy and smelly swamp, or even what cute outfit I'd need to head over to H&M and pick up so that I could stand in the middle of a volcano. And to me, that's just pretty cool. Hello. Yeah, if you made it this far into the video, to the end, I just want to say thanks for watching. I know this is kind of a very random video that I don't even really know if I stayed fully on topic for, but just felt like a rambling about some stuff. I'm still kind of just figuring things out and how I want to do things and how to do things in general. So thanks for, sticking through the whole thing. And also, if you like the song that was playing in the background, I actually made that song, so I'll probably put it up on the channel and maybe even put it up on Spotify or something like that. I'm also really curious if some of you have some favorite nature locations in gaming, whether it's just nostalgic based or just something that you think's like super cool. So if you have some that you can think of, I'd definitely love to talk about it down in the comments. So, shoot some off. Yeah. Just once again, thanks for listening, or for watching, I should say. And hope you have a good day.